to appoint unto them that mourn in Zion, to give unto them beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness, that they might be called trees of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that he might be glorified. Isaiah chapter 61 verse 3. When we experience difficult or even devastating events, we may be tempted to wonder if things will ever be alright, if we are ever gonna be happy again. But hey, we serve a God who transforms the past, who replaces mourning with joy and sadness with praise. There are no circumstances which dictate that we are doomed to a life of regret and emptiness. Instead, God promises that as we come to Him, He will replace pain with hope. In His first sermon preached in Nazareth, Jesus said that He was the fulfillment of the messianic promise in Isaiah chapter 61. Jesus Himself suffered greatly, enduring the pain of the cross for the joy that was set before Him, according to Hebrews chapter 12 verse 2. Because of His death and resurrection, we can now find freedom from the pain of the past and hope for a beautiful and a glorious future. Perhaps you have a deep-seated desire to be the person that God would have you be. I know right now it doesn't seem like it's possible. In this video, I would like us to discover a man in the Bible whom God used mightily in His service, despite so many disadvantages. This man's name was Jephthah, and he went from the hall of shame to God's hall of fame. From the book of Judges chapter 11, we see a man called Jephthah who had a very humble beginning. First of all, we notice Jephthah didn't grow up in a perfect family. In fact, he grew up in a dysfunctional home, a home that lacked leadership, a home that lacked harmony and peace and joy. Well, if you grew up in a home where your parents loved each other and loved you and brought you up to follow Jesus, you are in the minority. Most people come from broken homes, but let me tell you, it's not too late. Men, don't underestimate your importance in the family. Research shows that if a child is the first person in a household to become a Christian, then there's a very low possibility that everyone else in the household will become Christians. If the mother is the first to accept Christ, the percent goes up, but if the father is first, there's a very high probability that everyone else in the household will follow. When father goes first, spiritually, good things happen at home. If you find yourself in a home that is not great, will you be the kind of person that begins to make it great? Well, with God's help, that's exactly what Jephthah did. Notice that he was tagged as the son of a harlot. And I find it very interesting here because this is a man whose father's name was Gilead. But all we know about his mother was that she was a prostitute. Well, to be honest, this wasn't the ideal beginning to start one's life. How do you think he answered other kids when they asked him what his mom did for a living? But still, it didn't hold him back from becoming the man that God called him to be. Do you have any idea what bothers me? Is that we are raising up a generation of people who want to blame all their problems on others. If a young man begins to drink, he blames his dad, who was an alcoholic. If a young girl sleeps around, she blames it on her mom, who had affairs. It is rare to find someone who will honestly say, I am this way because I'm a sinner, because I'm responsible for it. The story continues that Gilead's wife bore sons, and when his wife's sons grew up, they drove Jephthah out and they say to him, you have no inheritance in our father's house, for you are the son of another woman. Because of his illegitimate birth, they buried him from the family's blessings. It's a sad thing when families don't get along like they should. It's a sad thing when siblings turn against each other and estrange themselves from each other. Life is simply too short to go around carrying grudges against people. But these brothers of Jephthah lived with their noses turned down at Jephthah. So he did what he had to do. He flee from his brothers and dwelt in the land of Tob. And worthless men banded together with Jephthah and went out raiding with him. His family rejected him, but God still had a plan for him. A lot of you come from tough families. Maybe you were born out of wedlock. Maybe your mom or your dad who left you and walked out of the relationship. There's an old saying that goes, there is no illegitimate children, only illegitimate parents. You were not a mistake or an accident in the sight of God. In fact, the Bible says that Jephthah, the Gileadite, was a mighty man of valor. Beloved, God sees you in a totally different way than others see you. Many of us have labeled ourselves based on what other people say about us. How about saying what God says? God says you are a mighty man of valor. Others saw something special in Jephthah. They saw special leadership ability in him, and men began following him on raids to take down the enemy. They probably were in the classiest group of guys you'd ever seen, but God was with them, leading them on to great victories. Evidently, Jephthah began experiencing great successes in his battles over the enemies. The Ammonites. The Bible never tells us how he became such a man of faith, but perhaps it was in his alone times. Maybe it was when he was far removed from familiar faces that he discovered God in a real way for the first time. Trials and tribulations can do one of two things. They can either make you better or bitter. Young people need to know that they don't know everything about God and about life right now. And neither do we adults. And I must tell you, God has a way of taking you from a place where you may be comfortable to a place where you'll be able to know God on a whole new different dimension. Do you see how God is taking Jephthah from zero to hero? Well, I see a lesson here about becoming a great person of faith. Check yourself. The last time someone rejected you, did you drown in self-pity? Did you say, I can be a leader? Or did you say, what could I have done better? What can I learn to make myself a better person here? Also, are you a person of prayer? Do you take your vows of marriage seriously before God? When you said, God, if you help me out of this, I'll never do it again, did you really never do it again? Do you have a history with God? Can you remember the ways that He has led you through some very troubled territories? If someone says God is not faithful, can you refute it from the depth of your heart and say, oh yes, He is? Well, let me tell you my story. We need more people like this around today. We need more men who can stand up and say, oh enemy, you've gone so far this time. The Lord rebuke you. We need more men who are going to rise up and be strong in the Lord and in the power of His might. We need more young people who are going to quit listening to what the world says about God and find out what God says about Himself. If we can do this, then like Jephthah, God can rise us from the ashes to the place of honor. May the Lord bless you.